Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
And welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to what's happening in Harrisburg and Albany with the experts on the issues. At the state capitals, they are Michael Geer with the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire at New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms. Michael, I want to begin with you this week. The head counters have spoken, and both Pennsylvania and New York are going to lose a congressional seat next year. What is redistricting going to look like in your state, and how soon do you think it'll be before we see these new-look political maps?
Well, a big indicator of how it's going to go is the fact that a lawsuit was filed by some Pennsylvania Democrats earlier this week asking the courts to get involved in the redistricting process. And so that to happen this early in the process indicates it's going to be a slow go. Yeah. There's a redistricting commission that's been set up, but based on the track record in Pennsylvania, especially when we've had divided government with a Democrat governor, Republican legislature, it's going to probably involve the courts by the end of it.
Yeah, it's always a chess match, isn't it, when we come to these once-a-decade events. Jason, it's so much is on the line here. New York, just 89 people shy of 19 million people. New York was 89 shy of getting to keep its 27 seats. Which one of those do you think will be carved up the most? A lot of folks have their eye on the southern tier with Tom Reed resigning.
Yeah, we speak of it as which one's going to be carved up the most, but really they're all going to be carved up to some degree. I think you might see the return of that earmuff district that kind of connects Buffalo and Rochester and gives this very weird-looking earmuff feeling to that district. But then that will also free up a lot of other shifting to occur, and I think Democrats will want to make it difficult for even John Katko in the Syracuse region, and a little shift can go a long ways to ousting more Republicans. And remember, the Democrats are in control, and so that's likely what you're going to see.
Yeah, okay, we'll keep our eye on it, and we'll be talking more about this in the days and weeks to come with the new census numbers out. Michael, while we're talking politics, primary day is fast approaching. It is Tuesday, May 18th. Mark your calendar. A couple statewide referendums that would rein in the governor's emergency powers. Do you expect those ballot questions to drive traffic to the polls? Traditionally, primary day is not very well attended by the voters.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think typically these ballot initiatives do that, but I think the issues that are at hand with restraining the governor's emergency powers will pull people out to the polls, but on both sides, and that's the challenge. And the polling is indicating those ballot initiatives on the constitutional amendments to restrain the governor's emergency powers, it's going to be a very close election. So if people care about it, they're going to want to turn out on May 18th.
Jason, we talked just in passing on this last week, but since then I've gotten like 5 phone calls from people who want more information on it. The Pregnancy Center Report Bill clearing an assembly committee. What is this exactly? Why do we need to be keeping a close eye on this?
Yeah, I believe this is a backdoor attempt to try to close pro-life pregnancy centers. These are Planned Parenthood's political allies who are, through this legislation, going to have this study bill that will require onerous data collection from these various pro-life pregnancy centers. And it's not going after services provided at Planned Parenthood facilities or other abortion facilities. It is only pro-life pregnancy centers. And when that question was brought up in the Health Committee, where this bill did pass the first committee, the comment made by one of the Manhattan Democrats that serve in that committee was, well, those centers will not provide abortions. So there's a viewpoint discrimination. This is clearly an attempt to close pro-life pregnancy centers.
Very interesting. And in a related matter, next week in the Pennsylvania Health Committee, Michael, an undercover filmmaker, a guy by the name of David Daleiden, perhaps you've heard of him. He's done a lot of films exposing some of the shady practices at Planned Parenthood. I'll let you explain more of that, Michael, but he's going to be talking next week before this Health Committee about some unethical things going on at the University of Pittsburgh. What is this all about?
That's right. This is a hearing by the Pennsylvania House of Representatives Health Committee that's been doing a series of hearings on the issue of abortion, and specifically this one's going to look at fetal experimentation, and David Daleiden is going to talk about what he has exposed at the University of Pittsburgh that involves things like taking the scalps of unborn babies that have been aborted and placing them on the backs and growing them on the backs of lab rats. That's just one part of what he has uncovered that is happening at the University of Pittsburgh, funded with federal and state tax dollars. And he's going to be releasing a video next week. We encourage people to keep their eyes open to the news because this will be a blockbuster.
Yeah. Well, we're talking pro-life issues. You know, I lump this with the pro-life cause, Jason. I know you do too. It's been called many things: medical aid in dying, death with dignity, compassionate care. I went online and looked at all the terms for it. There's like a dozen different terms for it. Whatever you call it, the wheels are moving on the euthanasia bus in New York. Why should Christians oppose physician-assisted suicide?
Well, you know, opposing assisted suicide really is a sanctity of human life issue, and Christians generally see abortion and opposing abortion as a sanctity of human life issue, as a beginning of life issue, but it also matters at the end of life. But you don't have to be a Christian to believe that you shouldn't be assisting people's suicides and helping them to die prematurely. This is going to impact everyone in our state and impact medical care in our state. So we really do have to be attentive to this issue and stopping assisted suicide in its tracks.
Yeah, I look at a lot of the lobbyists that are pushing assisted. You look at polls, Gallup had one that said, you know, over 70% of Americans support this. Are you surprised at the number of lobbyists who speak out on behalf of assisted suicide do so from a faith-based perspective?
Well, the reason that's happening is because they recognize that is the greatest obstacle is the faith-based community. So you are finding liberal pastors and religious leaders that are being dredged up to come out in support of assisted suicide, but it is not the majority of the faith-based community. It is simply polling data and talking headlines that are being used to give the impression that this is being backed by the faith-based community, but it's not. We understand that God is the giver and taker of life.
Yeah. Election reform legislation is a huge issue in Pennsylvania. Mike, I remember what you said on election night, that Pennsylvania is the Florida from 2000, how everything just shut down at 10:30 that night, and you have all this controversy. Republicans held a press conference recently arguing the status quo just won't do. Will we see any real tangible changes in the way that ballots are cast and counted in the Commonwealth?
Well, we need to see that, and what the Republicans are talking about is making it easy to vote in Pennsylvania, but hard to cheat. And some of what they're looking at is voter ID as a possibility and enhance signature integrity in terms of voters matching signatures, because that was a question mark in this last election process. But it is very partisan. We have a Democrat governor who is very happy with some of the election results that happened this time around and may not want to see the changes, and so they may face a veto with whatever changes they try to make happen.
Yeah, quick follow-up. Because of all the controversy we saw in Georgia with their voter ID law, are Pennsylvania politicians a bit skittish because nobody wants to be labeled a racist, but that's the term that's been put on anybody that supports voter ID in this country.
And it's entirely unfair that that term is being used, but I do think it is making some lawmakers skittish and not wanting to go down that path. And again, part of the concern is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will take matters into its own hand and nullify anything they try and do anyway.
All right. Hey, big story in the New York Times. Jason, we'll end with this. Senior aides to Governor Cuomo spent 5 months trying to keep secret the real number of COVID deaths in nursing homes. The Times says that those aides may have known as far back as last spring that the deaths were being undercounted. Is this new information to the Attorney General investigation?
Well, I imagine that they had some knowledge of that through the investigation, but now it's blowing out in the public. Everybody else is beginning to see that. And to think that the Cuomo administration, at the time when the governor was receiving reportedly a $4 million book deal, they were hiding these numbers and reporting that only 21% of deaths at the nursing homes were occurring, when really the number was 35%. Well, if you're putting $4 million in that mix, man, that's motive. And so you got a real problem if you're the governor right now.
All right, let's hope the truth comes out eventually. But we are out of time this week, and so many issues at those state capitals. Michael, folks have questions. Where can they find you, sir?
PAFamily.org.
Stay informed in New York as well. Jason, your website?
AlbanyUpdate.com.